Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Kelly, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Hi, good afternoon, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications here at SBAM. I want to welcome one of our new members. This is Chicken Tramper Ultralight Gear, and they're a new member of SBAM, but they were recently awarded a Smart Zone Best Small Business Award at the Michigan Celebrate Small Business Gala in May. So welcome to Chicken Tramper and their team. They make durable and lightweight gear, and they have a goal to keep wild places wild and practice leave no trace. So pretty cool company there and a recent awardee. All right, so Brian, we have a couple of issues that we need to get started on today. The first up is related to the Supreme Court decision issued Friday that overturned the Chevron doctrine. Tell us what this is and what does it mean?
Yeah, this is generally it has to do with how the authority that federal departments have in establishing rules. So laws pass. So the Congress, if you remember, kind of like School of Rock back in the day, you're learning about this stuff in school. Three branches of government. Congress passes laws. The executive branch enforces those laws. Part of the enforcement of those laws is making the specific rules and how it's implemented in the real world. And this overturning of this Chevron precedent from the early 1980s pretty significantly curtails what the liberties that the federal bureaucracy can take when establishing those laws. So it's a pretty big deal.
So you say it's a big deal, but how much of a shakeup is this? What's going to happen next?
Well, just in thinking about the statistics around it, you get a sense for how big this could really be. There have been 70 other Supreme Court decisions that have rested on this precedent. So decisions before the United States Supreme Court that rested on the precedent set in the Chevron case back in the early 1980s, 70 different cases. Lower courts have relied on this precedent 17,000 times. 17,000 times. So you think about over the course of 40 years, that's a lot of cases. Now, what type of cases would these be? It would be a case where somebody is disputing the federal government's authority to enforce a particular rule in a certain way. So it might be, well, take a small business, for example. There might be some federal agency that enforces a particular rule, and that business owner looks at what Congress passed and says, you don't have the authority to do this. And this Chevron doctrine, it really put a new set of like standards, if you will, in place that gave the bureaucracy itself the ability to essentially make law or make statute. So it's difficult to say at this moment how big a change this will be, because every one of those cases had a specific set of facts around it that were applied using this standard. It doesn't automatically overturn all of the decisions that relied on Chevron, but over the course of the coming years, I expect it will be very, very substantial.
All right, so can you break down the real issues behind this decision in a way that maybe I and other non-lawyers would understand?
Yeah, and I'm not a lawyer myself, and so I do like to think of these kind of just in regular terms. And so that you don't, without a law degree, like ultimately what does this mean? What is the precedent that was overturned? And Chevron essentially created two circumstances two sets of rules, and according to this current decision, this Loper decision that our current Supreme Court made, essentially they say that Chevron created kind of a fiction. And that fiction is that whenever Congress was ambiguous or silent on something in a law, if they were ambiguous or silent, that was the same thing as explicitly granting authority to the department to fill in the blanks. So Not that they could try to understand, what's the best application of this law or what was the intent of the law, but in those circumstances where something was ambiguous or silent, that it was the same thing as if Congress had written right into the law. Federal bureaucracy, you have clear and unfettered ability to establish whatever rules within that are silent. You have the authority to establish according to your own judgment. That was the first main precedent, which was sweeping. It's kind of been across the board. Think of all the things that every law is silent on. So if it's silent on it, then the bureaucracy just has free reign to do whatever they want. The other thing the other kind of test that the Chevron precedent put in place was it established a requirement that that when a law was passed, that if there was any way that a federal bureaucracy standard could be justified through that law, if there's any way that it could fit, they had to consider it legal. So in other words, again, they're not trying to get back to the intent of the law, the goals of the law. It's just basically said if there's any way this interpretation could fit under any circumstances, you must side with the federal agency. So as you can see, like it put a lot of power. It's an enormous amount of power in the hands of the bureaucracy to establish these rules. And instead it put the more, like everything else that goes through the court system that is not federal rulemaking, when there's something that law is silent on or there's an ambiguity in it, they look at the facts of it and they have a process for determining what is the best application given the information that is available. So in other words, there's no presumption that you have to go in the bureaucracy's favor. They can, or they normally go through the process of determining what was the purpose of the law in the first place and does fit within the intent of Congress. So this has always been kind of a strange carve out from the regular application or measuring sticks that are used in legality. And so, look, if it's silent, that's explicit authority granted to the department. Oh, by the way, the reason why that first one, that explicit authority question, was so strange was because it is very common for Congress to literally write into the law that authority is explicitly granted to the department to determine the details about something. So the fact that when Congress wants that to be the case, the law is written that way. If they stay silent, it doesn't make sense that it would be interpreted as though it were explicitly granted. So between that and the presumption that the law was the presumption that anything that could potentially fit within interpretation was automatically legal, was those two things really were what was struck down. Now, it doesn't mean though that all 70,000 of those cases are reversed. Then each of any of those plaintiffs that would like to make use of this new decision would need to bring that again before a court. And it wouldn't go before the Supreme Court. It's just the whole process would start over. So it's not really clear how many of those cases would even be relevant today and how many it would make sense to kind of push through the process. But moving forward, when a new law is passed, that the regular rules of reviewing ambiguous or silent provisions would now apply, as opposed to this special authority carve out that the bureaucracy had up until this point.
All right, well, thanks for that explanation. Let's move on to education. Researchers at Harvard and Stanford recently released a study that examines how states have fared in their educational recovery since the pandemic. Obviously, here at SBAM, we work with Launch Michigan and support education as a critical component of our future economy. And I think this study supports that. So tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, it says that Michigan students are about a half a grade behind where they were pre-pandemic. So imagine if you're going into ninth grade, really you're where somebody who's halfway through eighth grade would have been before. And so still pretty significantly behind. But what this was looking at is recovery rates. So how much of that lost ground has been made up in the intervening years? And in Michigan, the answer was precious little. So we went from being 45% of a school year behind to 44% of a school year behind. So just essentially a 1% improvement in terms of the relative measure being behind. That put Michigan in terms of recovery in the bottom 5 states. Now they didn't review all 50 states. I think they reviewed 28. And so Michigan was in the bottom 5 of those that were reviewed. So not particularly good outcomes. And it really does underscore, well, not particularly, these are very poor outcomes. And given the fact that Michigan's demographics are so challenging, we really cannot afford to have so many students falling behind. We need more of the population that we have reaching a point where they're able to compete and win in the 21st century global economy today. And what we'll need tomorrow is even more because of the challenging demographics. But these numbers show that we're behind and we're staying behind when some other states are really catching up. I thought it was interesting in terms of those who had made gains, actually pretty close to us. The state of Illinois had made some pretty impressive gains back from what they had lost. These aren't absolute performance standards, so it's not that Illinois is doing better than Massachusetts. Massachusetts fell back less, so the recovery percentage is smaller. See what I mean? But Illinois, Mississippi, Louisiana, Wisconsin, Ohio, all of these states had made pretty impressive comebacks. So their absolute performance relative to each other varies very wildly, but in terms of the percentage they've made back compared to themselves before the pandemic is where they really have done well. And then and now actually the states I just listed off are in reading and math. They're different states in terms of recovery. Alabama, Tennessee, Wisconsin, Mississippi, and Ohio. So some overlap there, some really strong recovery rates. So Michigan in reading was behind 45% of the school year, now 44%. And then in mathematics, we're behind 50% and now behind 44%. So still a long way to go to just get back to where we were before the pandemic started.
Yes, indeed, a long way to go. So Brian, we've invited our colleague David Roy to join us on today's show. David is the executive director of the SBAM Foundation, and you two are going to talk about some great new opportunities we have through the foundation.
Yeah, we have a designation as a small business support hub at the Small Business Association of Michigan, the SBM Foundation, and working in close partnership with our association with SBAM to deliver services. So David, maybe it's only been a couple weeks since this launch has happened of these services. We've had some pretty robust activity. Let's start there in terms of how many businesses have applied, been accepted, and are now in the pipeline to receive some services. And then we'll talk after that about what types of services are available.
Sure. Thanks, Brian. I appreciate the opportunity. So far, we've had 175 businesses across Michigan who have applied and have been accepted to our program. They're in various stages of the acceptance process right now. And we have another, as of this afternoon, we have another 79 applicants in our draft queue. So they're in the process of filling out their application. So we launched our program on June 13th at SBAM's Small Business Summit annual meeting, and have had just tremendous activity and tremendous interest in our programs. since then, and it has been pretty much nonstop since the 13th of June.
Yeah, great activity right out of the blocks. And these are services for companies that are beyond the startup phase. So, late first stage companies, second stage companies that are poised and ready for growth. What sorts of things are available through the foundation? Somebody's watching today, maybe they've seen a few of our emails on it, but give us a sense for what kinds of courses, professional development, technical development is available for a business owner or their team.
It is a massive and growing menu of programs and offerings. Our website, sbam.org, you can go out to the website and take a look at the programs that are available now. There are 20 or so that are listed. We're literally putting on more every day. We have right now, I think, in our queue for programming, upwards of 70 courses between SBAM and in its group of providers. And then one of our partners is Walsh College out of their Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And they are going to be bringing upwards of another 40 courses over the next 12 months, just in the next 12 months, to our program. And they run the gamut from small cohort learning opportunities. We have one program that is limited to literally 3 participants, but it's really hands-on intensive work. And then we have other programs that are taking as many as 50 participants for all-day events. And so there is programming available for management development, developing your team, developing your brand, expanding sales opportunities, pretty much everything under the sun that an established late first stage, early second stage business could be looking for is either available now or will be available within the next 12 months.
That's awesome. And give us a sense for the experience of applying for the grant. How much time would somebody expect? I know Sarah put the link on there. Somebody clicked on that link. How much time are you finding it takes for somebody if they've really got the time to get front to end of it, does it take to get through?
In total, our studies have shown it takes 20 minutes for an owner to fill out the application. It was designed to provide us with the information we need to approve you within the requirements of the program, but not ask questions that are, quite frankly, none of our business. So we're not asking questions about your personal wealth. We're not asking questions. We're not asking to see tax returns or financial statements for you or for your company. We're interested in who you are as a business, who you are as an owner, what your experience was during COVID, what you experienced coming out of COVID, and what you would like to do going forward. And from that, we can determine if you meet the requirements of our program. And then we will work with each applicant once they are approved and they become a participant. We'll work with them to help them match the programs that we have available. And some of them are on our website now, more are being added every day. But if someone says, I just can't find the one I'm looking for, they can contact us and we can actually work to find a program that meets their needs. This is, for lack of a better term, this is really a handcrafted college level program that we have built specifically for first and second stage small businesses.
That's it really is a new kind of level of service that is available across so many different disciplines for both the business owner or members of their team, their employees that can take advantage of it. Now we try to make this so that people could qualify, as many people as possible could qualify. If you're more of a startup business, we would refer you to one of the other hubs that are specializing in earlier stage companies. But for those late first stage or early second stage companies that are really ready to grow, that we think this will be most beneficial for our lineup of programming. What are the main qualification criteria that somebody has to meet in order to be accepted? Oh, we've lost your sound there, David, for some reason.
Sorry, today is the day where you use a leaf blower outside my office window. Um, there's two levels of qualification. First is for the program. The program itself are based on requirements set by our partners at the MEDC, and they're based on where your location is, your office is located. It has to be in Michigan. And if it's within a certain area, certain areas on a map that they've specified, your business automatically qualifies to get in. If you are owned and controlled by, your business is owned and controlled by a woman, a veteran, a person with disabilities, or a minority, you're automatically in the program and you automatically qualify. Um, and if you don't qualify under those categories, we have a series of questions that we ask relative to the impact that COVID had on your business. And based on those questions, we can determine if you were disproportionately impacted by COVID, and then you will qualify for the program. And then once those folks we take that group of people who have met those qualifications, we make certain that they are, in fact, a first or second stage business. We're looking for businesses that are at least 2 years old, or a business owner who has experience beyond just the startup phase. So we've run into a number of applicants who have actually their business is actually quite new because they had to start over. They closed down during COVID, they closed their business, and they started. So their businesses might only be a year and a half old, but the entrepreneur behind it, the owner behind it, has multiple years of experience in that industry. They qualify in our program. Any company who has 5 or more FTEs qualifies for our program on a business maturity level. And then people who are with sales approaching $500,000 and more qualify for our program. So it's very, very broad. And we have a lot of folks who are maybe 3 years old or 4 years old, and they are well less than $500,000 in sales. It's not one and the other, it's one or the other. And we've had other people who have just started their business, but the entrepreneur behind them is an experienced entrepreneur and is beyond the startup phase, and we're taking them on as a established first or second stage business.
Excellent. Well, we are off to a really quick start in getting participation here. Sarah shared the links where you can look at the course listing and the opportunities that are available. And by the way, when you do participate, if you do participate at a robust level with these, it makes you eligible to apply for a cash grant after you hit a certain participation level. So really great opportunities all the way around. David, thanks so much for all your work on this and for joining us today in the briefing.
Thank you, Brian. One last thing. If you are in doubt, apply. If you can't qualify, we will refer you to someone who can help you. And if you do qualify, we'll get you in right away. Right now, more than 95% of applicants are being accepted into our program because they meet the qualification requirements. So we're happy to have everybody who thinks they could apply or wants to apply.
The more the merrier. All right.
Absolutely.
Thanks, David.
Thanks so much.
All right, yes, and I did put the links in as you said, and we really are adding courses to the site daily, so check back frequently. Okay, Brian, before we started today's show, we saw that Epic MRA released results of a new poll related to the presidential election. What are the results?
Yeah, pretty similar to what we've seen in recent months in terms of the top of the ticket. So presidential contest, of course, is at the top of the ticket. And so it came back. They tested in a couple of different ways. They looked at with and without third-party candidates. So with the third-party candidates, it was Trump at 41%, Biden at 38%. So Trump with a 3-point lead. And then if you include if you just look at it head to head without any of the third-party candidates, then Trump was up by 4%. What was interesting to me about that is that there's this kind of conventional wisdom that that third-party candidates hurt President Biden more than President Trump. But actually, there's a growing body of evidence that suggests that that additional candidates, including Kennedy, on the ballot, actually it draws from both candidates, maybe a little bit more from President Trump than from President Biden. So, but in any event, it looks pretty similar to the polls that we've seen in, at least in terms of margin, with Trump with a slight lead, most of the swing states, that type of 1 to 2 to 3 to 4% lead, it seems to be pretty consistent over the last few months.
All right, and to close out today's show, let's take a look at the Data Monday report.
All right, so a little bit of an eclectic group of slides here today, which is often the case once we get to the end of the month. So I thought this was kind of an interesting one. You see, I pull slides from Arbor Data Science pretty often, but just showing year by year and then the last several quarters, what has happened in terms of overall retirement market assets. So it looks at annuities and public pensions, private pensions, defined contribution plans. The green on the bottom, defined contribution plans. So think like 401ks. So you see that that is $14.3 trillion at the end of the first quarter of 2024. And that is not quite to where it was at the end of 2021. So it's 14.5 trillion at that point, but it is kind of marching its way back. It hit a high point, an all-time high, and then kind of crashed after the end of 2021. So looking across the board, the total retirement assets pretty much recovered to that 2021 level. Now I wanted to look at this is a reading of inflation. It's a little different. The personal consumption expenditure statistic is one that is it's the other inflation statistic. So we look at consumer price index. That's the one that always gets attention. That's a specific basket of goods, and how has the price of that very explicit specific basket of goods changed? What the personal consumption expenditure index looks at is what people are spending and how much they're spending. And so it would take, for example, something might go up in price. Maybe I'll buy a substitute in order to mitigate or buy less of that. So this is one that's usually going to show as lower than consumer price index because it includes the types of changes in behavior that an individual would have. This is actually a more favored index for the Federal Reserve to look at. And so it does show that, especially that core index continuing to come down. So this is what gives me a little bit more confidence that we'll see before the election, maybe one decrease in the interest rates. And then looking at the month by month, the personal consumption expenditures, you'll see up 0.02 month over month. So relative to the all the months on this chart, you can see it's toward the lower end. So again, more reason to think that just it's inching and only inching, but inching generally in the right direction. Another kind of interesting slide that we look at sometimes is how much savings is happening as a percentage of disposable personal income. So we know that disposable personal income, because things are getting more expensive, including necessities, that the size of that pie is shrinking, but also but the percentage that's going into savings is also at a level that is a bit lower. It's hung out over 4% much of the time between the pandemic and going all the way back to the Great Recession. And it's generally been over 4%, sometimes much higher. And but it's been hanging out below 4% here for a little while. And then actually over 5% much of the time. Remember, this is just not percentage of total income that's saved, but of just disposable income that's saved. Government transfer payments as a percentage of personal income. This looks at, of all personal income out there in America, how much of it is from government sources, not including people that just have a job with the government, but things like benefits and social service support. These are payments for somebody at about 17.5%. You see this a lot lower than it was in the middle of the pandemic, but still very much on the high side compared to history. The last one I wanted to look at is road funding. This comes from Bridge, Michigan. We look at stuff from Bridge a lot, but this really did stick out at me. So we see all the road construction happening. Lane miles fixed. This compares two time periods, 2015 to 2018, and it compares that 3-year period, or four, so 15, 16, 17, 18, 4-year period, to 19, 20, 21, 22, 4-year period after that. 5.4% more lane miles fixed. So the number of roads fixed in the last 4 years is 5.4% more than the 4 years previous. However, the cost of getting that extra 5%, total cost is up 46%. So this is one you see, like, inflation has hit hard. It's hit especially hard in road construction. So we got 5% more roads fixed, but we paid 46% more in order to do it. So it's just not as much bang for the buck as what anybody expected. And then, of course, the cost per mile to fix those roads is different, depending on how much needs to be done, but the cost per mile is up 38%. So it seems like there's a lot of road construction out there. There is a lot of road construction out there, but it's, in terms of lane miles, about 5% more than what we normally see. It's just that the price tag is so dramatically higher than before. You know, I think as we looked at many years ago, back in 2015, when the gas tax and the registration fees were being increased to pay for roads, I think it's very, very safe to say that the assumption was that if you increase road funding by 46%, that you would get a pretty substantial increase in the number of lane miles. It just hasn't turned out that way. The costs have risen so much, only 5% more lane miles fixed.
All right, well, thanks for that report, Brian, and thanks everyone for tuning in today. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Safe 4th of July. SBAM's actually closed July 4th and July 5th, and then we'll be back here on July 8th at 3 p.m. We'll see you then.
See you in about a week.